Hello everyone, my name is Ashton Meertens, and the last few months I've been called by God to make this video for maybe someone who's struggling with depression or anxiety, or even someone who doesn't really even know that God exists. I'm here to give my testimony about how God saved me from depression and my abusive household growing up. So, without further ado, so again, my name is Ashton. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in a Christian household. It was my brother, my mother, my dad, and I. God showed himself to me when I was very, very young. And so during this story, I'm going to jump back and forth between my experiences with God and my general experiences just growing up as a child. So, as early as I can remember, I want to say maybe I was like 6 years old. I used to come home from school and used to come home my homework and ask my dad for help with my math homework. And whenever I couldn't understand how to do the homework, he would spank me. He would beat me, yell at me and curse at me, and even my younger brother too. And for a long time, my brother would just hide in the bathroom when we was trying to do homework because he was terrified of my dad. I became terrified of my dad too. We developed a deep sense of fear. The household that we grew up in was also one that was conditioning us to please our parents in order to receive love. So it was very conditional, the love in our household. And if I didn't do what my dad said, or I didn't do what he wanted, or I didn't do what pleased him, it was like the end of the world. It was the worst thing ever. So I grew up a perfectionist. I was always trying to please my dad. I was always trying to reach this unrealistic, perfect standard and can never match up to it. I was always constantly being criticized or compared to other people or other things. And my brother grew up trying to compare himself to me. It was very, very horrible, the things that we endured and what we believed about ourselves. So we grew up with a lot of feelings of unworthiness. I never believed that I would be enough or worthy of love. I never believed that I could be exactly what my parents wanted. To backtrack a little bit, currently I have my master's in psychology, so I'm able to understand now what happened. My dad suffers from narcissistic personality disorder, undiagnosed of course because they never get diagnosed, and he also suffers from borderline personality disorder. As a result of his disorder and his actions that he imposed on us, I developed depression, my brother developed depression, my mom developed depression, all of us with suicidal ideations and anxiety. My dad's a textbook narcissist. Everything that you can see in the DSM-5, he checks off all the boxes. The self-grandiosity, the lack of empathy, the, just inability to just perceive reality without him at the center of it. Engaging in risky behavior. He's mentally abusive, physically abusive, verbally abusive, you name it. If we didn't do whatever he wanted, whenever he asked, he would spank us or he would take things away. If I just wanted to go see my friends, like a regular child, he would tell me I had to do chores, or I had to mow the lawn, or I had to wipe the floors, and I couldn't go see my friends or hang out with them because it was always something that was happening. I was always getting in trouble just randomly that last second, or my dad just straight up didn't want me to leave the house, or he would say, you prefer going over to their house, you don't let them come over us, why don't you like me, why don't you like them coming over our house? So then you're grounded. And he would just do the craziest things. To my mom, my dad would tell her she's too fat or she's ugly, she's not good enough, he's gonna go find a better wife. My mom did everything to try to please my dad. She tried to lose weight, she tried to run more, get gym memberships, she got liposuction surgery, everything, just to try to make herself perfect for my dad. And he would always just verbally destroy her and verbally abuse her. And she suffered greatly, but she held it together because of us, because of my brother and myself, because she wanted to raise us, so she endured. And also, it's a toxic relationship, so she doesn't believe that she can have a better person at the end of the day, because this is being drilled into her. She didn't believe that anyone else would like her or she'd be worthy of love also. And so my dad is just constantly just beating that into our minds, beating that into our heads, that we're not good enough, we'll never find a better person or find a better father. he's the best father in the world and he does all the things for us and we don't do anything for him. He's constantly drilling that into our heads and we're constantly trying to please him but never can. My dad would do things like he would come into my room in the middle of the night, drunk, and his idea of telling me a good night story, he would just tell me about how he left New York and came to Georgia and how he couldn't find a wife in New York, and so he made it seem like he settled for my mom. And because my mom and dad knew each other for only 3 months and then I was conceived, I got the impression, of course, that I was a mistake and that my mom was desperate and that my dad settled for my mom because he couldn't find anyone else that's better. And so my dad would tell me to find someone who loved me more than I loved them. And it's just deep in this sense of me never being able to be worthy of love. And mind you, in my mind I'm thinking, since I'm not worthy of love from my parents, how the hell am I supposed to be worthy of love from a spouse, someone I don't know, someone who's not my family? It used to eat me up for years. I would cry myself to sleep at night because of the thought of it. He would often project his own shortcomings on us. He'd be very cruel. We were never doing enough. We were never good enough. We were always lazy. We always didn't help enough around the house. You name it. Anything he could throw at us, he would throw at us. We also grew up in a household that, where our needs and emotions were neglected because none of them mattered except for my dad's emotions or what he wanted. So I grew up denying myself emotions or needs, and eventually I was introduced to porn at like 12 years old. And so that would help me cope with my emotions and the abuse that went on in the household. That would help me be better or be happy so that I wouldn't be sad around the house, because if I was sad, my dad would spank us because we weren't putting a smile on our faces. And if we didn't smile, he would just beat us more. And eventually, we kind of just, we grew to not want to be around each other. My brother would go to his room, I'd go to my room. My mom would be in a different part of the room, I was watching TV. My dad would be in his own part, and we just kind of didn't, at least for my part, I didn't want anything to do with anyone. So throughout all this time, God's still, training me or teaching me. When I'm having moments of silence or alone with him, I would always feel called to pick up my Bible. I don't know why, I would just always go and pick it up, and there'd be a verse and God would speak to me there, or he'd speak to me audibly. It was rare, but he would sometimes. And at the age of 13, when we went to church, there was a baptism going on, and a voice came from my shoulder and it told me, go get baptized, you're gonna regret it. And so I was like, I was excited. I'm finally old enough to make my own decision, at least somewhat, because my parents were so controlling and so strict that I couldn't make my own decisions. Granted, my mom is well educated, she wanted the best for us. My dad's manipulative and controlling behavior, combined with that, we just couldn't do what we wanted to do at all. We always were following orders, we're always doing what our parents wanted us to do. This was one thing that I could choose to do for myself. I got baptized and my brother got baptized after me. That night after we got baptized, when I was in my bed, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and I had this sleep paralysis. I couldn't move my head, couldn't move my arms, couldn't move my body. I couldn't really even think clearly. And I remember fighting to try to get up, and I look across the room and there's this dark, shadowy figure with red eyes just staring at me, just menacingly. And I close my eyes and I try to go back to sleep immediately, and I'm like, just don't open them, it'll go away in the morning, just don't open them. And so I did, and that morning it was gone. But the problems in our house got worse. My parents were always arguing, my parents were always fighting. My dad was always threatening to leave us. He's like, I'm gonna leave your ass, I'm gonna leave the kids, whatever, you gotta be stranded, you're not gonna know what to do. He would just beat these fears into us, and the reason him and my mom were divorcing, he would blame it on us, and it was our fault that they were having their own problems. And I would be like, Dad, don't leave, and he would just push me off or whatever and cuss me out, and he always kept us in constant fear that he was leaving. And so I developed this huge sense of abandonment, this huge fear of abandonment, and always trying to apologize to my dad. Even if it was things that he did wrong, he would never apologize, and I would apologize for the things that he did wrong, even when it was blatantly and clearly his fault, and it would rip me apart. During my basketball games in high school, I would never play well because my dad would always compare me to my teammates. especially on the car ride home, he would just yell at me and curse at me. And it was an hour-and-a-half car ride, and he would just be so furious about my performance, and it never made me play any better because he would just compare me to my other friends that did better on the team. I played a lot of basketball. I played AAU, I played high school, junior varsity, everything. And he would just, after every game, he would just yell at me, and I never did well. So I was very depressed in high school, suicidal in high school. Thank God I made it out alive. Fast forward to college, I finally find an opportunity to kind of become a new person and kind of make a new name for myself. And so I kind of use it as an opportunity to take all the fears that my dad beat into my head and all the things that I grew up with and prove to myself that I'm not those things. And so I became a different person, but on the surface and on the inside, it was still this very broken Ashton, this broken child that I never ever dealt with, and I didn't want people to see or find out about, and I just didn't know how to deal with him either. And whenever I would come home, I would be depressed, but out of college, I'd be this different person. And you know, in my search for love, in my search for acceptance, in my search for validation, I became this sort of, you know, this like player, this ladies' man, this sort of dream guy that could appeal to all these different girls. And I found my acceptance, and I found the love and the validation that I was like searching for by hooking up with other people and sleeping with other people. And it would give me that short hit of what I wanted, what I needed, until it ran out, and I would have to find someone else or find something else. And then along with that, I developed a bunch of different trust issues because I couldn't trust anyone, especially when you're living like that and you're going from breakup to breakup. You learn not to trust anyone. And so I learned that I had to be independent for myself. I learned that I had to do things myself. I became, hyper vigilant of my mistakes, who I was, and be hypersensitive to who I was and how I came across to different people. And that was a combination of the hypervigilance that I acquired and trying not to piss off my dad as a child, and trying to maintain these relationships that I couldn't hold on to, that were deteriorating no matter how good of a person I became, how much I worked on myself, how much of a player, how many tactics I implemented to change my character or to become sexier, to become this different person. It seemed like no matter what I could do, it would only work to a certain point. And so eventually I came across this girl. I thought she was beautiful. And around the same time, I came across the law of attraction. So I just want to interject on this part and say that the law of attraction is demonic in the sense that it brings you away from Jesus. Anything that doesn't lead you to Jesus is therefore demonic. And at this point, right, I've been trained by God to recognize that God was who he said he was. So when I found out about the law of attraction, I was like, oh, this is the test that I've been preparing for since I was a child, to recognize that there is God in this, there's Jesus in this, but, you know, not negating the other spiritual teachings that the law of attraction brought. It says in the law of attraction, if you believe you have received something, the universe will give it to you. And I was like, oh, okay, I've seen this before. I opened my Bible. Jesus says, ask and believe that you have received and you shall receive. And I was like, oh my God, this must be the truth. And so I tried it, and I believed that it worked because I believed it, not because it was already true and just waiting on me to believe so that I can receive it, if that makes sense. So I go ahead and I asked for this girlfriend to date, and God tells me, okay, but only for 3 months. So we go on to have this amazing relationship. The Spirit of God was on me. I had peace, like it was undescribable, the amount of peace that I had. Everything worked for me. If I said something and happened, I could see into the future. Someone could knock on the door, and I knew they were gonna knock on the door like 10 seconds before they knocked on the door. Everything happened the way that I would say it if I said it, and things just clicked. It didn't make any sense. Up until the point of the last day of the semester, when we found out she was pregnant. She was terrified, I was terrified, and she confessed to me that we couldn't just try to figure out Planned Parenthood or an abortion clinic because her dad would find out. At the time, too, she was more Christian than I was. So she was sad about that part, and she was sad about the fact that her dad would find out. Lo and behold, her dad's in the mafia. I had no idea. I met the guy. I saw a bunch of neighbors at his house like staring at me. I didn't understand why, but now I know why. We were in a tight, horrible situation. I was broke. I had no money, and it's the last day of the school semester before the summer. We were screwed. But I still had this peace of God, and so I was like, you know what, we'll be okay. I understood we'll be okay. And miraculously, we had accumulated $500 that same day. We found an abortion clinic that didn't keep records, it didn't take any names, just took straight cash. And when we did it, God helped us do it. So I just want to interject here and say that God is obviously pro-life in the situation. Yes, he did allow us to have an abortion, but again, not every situation is exactly the same, and life is not black and white, right? There's some gray in between. So in this specific instance, my life was in danger, the girl's life was in danger, and the child's life was in danger anyways. So we had to rely on some kind of miracle to save us from this situation. Lo and behold, we end up breaking up for the summer, and she didn't explain to me why, but she just said that our family didn't want us together. And so all of that peace that I acquired, all the joy that I acquired, the self-love, everything that I had went out the window. It was like it was just stripped from me. And all of a sudden, all the lies that I grew up with, all the things that my dad ever beat into me, the depression, me being suicidal, all of it came flooding back to me, and it broke me into pieces, and it was horrible. It was the worst pain I've ever experienced by far. And it went on for weeks. It was so bad that one day I felt this presence come. This presence just overwhelmed me with love and compassion and acceptance, and I had never ever felt it before. And this presence didn't speak audibly, it spoke to my heart, and it asked me what I want in a girlfriend, but it told me like not to lie, to tell the whole truth. And so I did, and I just like poured out my heart to this presence, and it said, okay, just wait. Fast forward a few more months, I'm still depressed, I'm getting high all the time so that I don't have to feel my emotions. I'm trying to get drunk, I'm trying to do whatever I can to pick up these broken pieces and put them back together, and nothing is working. I'm freaking out, and it's horrible, and no one can tell because I'm just surviving, I'm just getting by. I end up meeting the girl, the one that God promised me, and she matches every single thing to a T, and I'm like shocked. And at that moment, I hear another voice come over my shoulder, and it goes, "Are you ready?" And I was terrified. I was terrified because up until this point, I had not believed in monogamy because my parents had horrible relationships. Everyone else I knew didn't really have great relationships. Why would I want to be married to one person for the rest of my life? And especially when I found my validation and acceptance in sleeping with other people, I definitely didn't want to try to do this way. But faith got me to that point, and so I decided that faith was going to be the avenue that I chose to live by. And so I said yes. I ended up dating that girl, and we moved in together. The summer we were supposed to move in together, my parents forced me to go get my master's degree. My dad was like, either you're gonna get a master's degree or you're out of this house. So I was like, all right, fine, whatever. I go ahead and I apply, I get into St. John's again for the master's program. I decided to try to move with my girlfriend, and with the understanding that my parents are gonna fully support me and pay for me to live and get by while I'm doing this education. We agreed upon that. Right when it comes time to get my things packed together, my parents tell me they're not gonna support me. I move up to New York with $1 in my bank account. Freaking out, super anxiety, I was really scared. The depression still hadn't been figured out. I had this girlfriend and it was amazing, but inside I was still broken, I was still destroyed, and I still was lost. I didn't know what to do. I would sit here in this apartment that we got, and I would be terrified because I didn't know how I was gonna pay for my bills the next month. My dad had, with his ignorance, confused me out of a job opportunity that I had for myself, and I had no idea what to do. And month after month I would just sit in my thoughts and be terrified in my thoughts, and I only had so much of the student loan left that I could pay for my apartment, and I was freaking out because I didn't know what to do. And so towards the end of me running out of money, I started seeing on my phone pictures of Jesus on my Instagram, and I was like, this is weird, you know, I keep seeing pictures of Jesus, like, and the post would say, I died for you, like, do you care? Do you know me? I died for you. I'm trying to talk to you. You know, do you know me? And I'd be like, yeah, I know Jesus. And then in the back of my mind would go, do you really? Do you really know Jesus? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm a Christian. I do. And then I'd be like, but I don't know Jesus. I actually don't know. And around that same time, all of the unresolved trauma and the unresolved things that I had endured in my life were now spilling out into my relationships. And all of a sudden, I was being the person that I swore I would never become, my dad. And it was affecting my relationship with my girlfriend. And it got to a point where I was like, oh my God, like, I cannot destroy the same thing I asked God for. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get rid of this anger that is just sitting in my heart. I don't know how to get rid of this sadness. I don't know what to do. And I was like, you know what? Oh, I can go to God. That's what I can do. I can write a letter to him in my Bible. I've done it before and I've had things work out. I can do this. And right when I had that thought, I just felt a thank you. Thank you. And so that's what I did. And so I wrote a letter to God, and then next thing you know, I started just going through crazy circumstances. At the base of it, I still was trying to wrestle with the fact of whether or not God really existed, because up until this point, I had fallen away from him during college. I wasn't going to church as much. I wasn't praying as much. I wasn't reading my Bible. I didn't know Jesus. I had no idea really who Jesus was. I knew he was mentioned in the Bible, but I didn't know him. I was convinced that I could get to heaven based upon my own actions because I really strive to be a great person. So, slowly but surely, God kept bringing me into different circumstances to communicate with me, even when I doubted that he really even existed. My depression was so all-consuming that I just sat there in darkness, and I was like, there's no light, there's no hope, there's nowhere for me to go. Everything's, destroyed. The only reason I wasn't killing myself was because I didn't want to go to hell for committing suicide. That was the biggest thing that stopped me from killing myself. I didn't want to go to hell. And I didn't know what happened when you died. So I would sit there in that darkness, and God would come visit me in my thoughts in the darkness. And he would be there. And even when I would turn him away, even when I'd be like, no, like, that's not true that I can be out of here. That's not true that I can have hope. He would just meet me there all the time. And he would care for me. And eventually he would heal me from the depression. And it was painful. It was horrible. But healing is horrible. Healing hurts more than the pain sometimes. But he would assure me that he was going to use it for my good, and it's not for nothing. And all the things that I went through, he was going to use, and that I had a future, and that I was loved, and that I was cared for by him. And really, that's all I really wanted to hear, because up until this point, I was convinced that there was nothing to my existence. There was no reason for it. I was just here. And so one of the things that God said to me was, you're here because I want you here, because I love you. I made you. And to me, that was enough, because that's all I wanted. So I stuck around. Stuck around meaning I continued to live because I was still suicidal. I did try to take my life one time by trying to swallow a few pills, and I spit them out. And while this is happening, I'm seeing videos pop up, like preaching videos on my cell phone by this guy. His name is Stephen Furtick, and he runs a church. It's called Elevation Church. And he would speak to me in that moment and be like, you tried to take your life, but God is here for you, and God will not let you down, and you're gonna live. And he would just speak to me. He would be God speaking to me just in those moments, and they would match my thoughts. the things that Stephen would say would match my thoughts and the actions that I was doing and the things that I tried, like, and it was incredible. And I still wrestled with God. I still wrestled to see if he was real. Is this just something I'm imagining? Is this just something I'm pretending, you know? And why don't you just make yourself more known to me? Why don't you just, you know, you see me reaching out for you, you see me trying to find you, where are you? And slowly and slowly and slowly, God revealed the truth that he is real to me. But he doesn't impose himself on people, because then what, right? If God wants a relationship with all of us, just telling people that he's real, that's not really gonna make them want a relationship with him genuinely. They're gonna want a relationship out of fear, if they do want a relationship. Or they're just gonna think, oh, I just have to serve God, right, because it's the right thing to do, right? That's not genuine, that's not love, right? And so that was one of the things that God showed me during that time. And so while this is happening, I'm still freaking out because I can't pay my bills. I'm still freaking out because I don't know what to do. And month after month after month, at the end of the month, God would miraculously give me enough money for rent and just a little bit extra. And that was it. Period. Like, month after month after month, I had no idea where my money was coming from. And on that last day of the month, it would always come at the right time. It would never come beforehand, only at that time. And so this happened for a long time. I want to say about 1.5 years, maybe even 2 years. Eventually, I ended up being given a job as a mentor. So now I work as a mentor in Brooklyn for at-risk youth, and I help those children who are struggling, because I'm able to understand where they're coming from, able to get into those deep, dark parts of their lives and help them and try to shed some light. And that's the way that God's been using me there. But the abuse from my father's side is still ongoing. So in May of this year, in 2022, I'm away from home. My brother was at home at the time. My dad tried to strangle my mom. He tried to kill her. And my brother was there, so he pulled my dad off and he called the police. And now my parents are getting a divorce. Obviously, this broke me, but it made me understand that my whole life I've been abused. Up until that point, I'm 25 years old, I had no idea that I had been abused. I know that I grew up with feelings of unworthiness, I grew up with feelings of not being enough, but I didn't know the reason why. And so when that part started to click, a lot of the rest of the things started to click. My dad's family continues to allow him to be abusive because they don't hold each other accountable. They swear that family means everything to them and that they hold each other accountable and that, you know, we're stronger together, but it's a lie. Last year, when my dad forced my mom out the shower naked, forced her to the ground and held out her phone demanding that she send him money into his account, she tried to call my aunt and tell her what was happening, and she came over to the house and she was like, Conrad, don't put your hands on Michelle, and he was like, you shut the hell up and get out of here, and she left. Didn't say a word about it. That was last year, and she hasn't said anything to anyone. He's been just living off my mom's money for the last, 5, 6 years, 7 years. If you don't know, the way narcissism presents itself is that my dad on the surface to all these other people, he'll be this great, amazing guy. He's funny, he's charming, he does caring things for people. On the inside, he's just a horrible monster. Behind closed doors, he's just a different person. But because people see the outside, they never understand what happens behind closed doors. And so my dad silenced us, and he took our power away. And so we couldn't even begin to vocalize to other people to have them believe that he was doing those things to us. Hell, it was a hard time even believing the things that happened to us, because we would be abused or whatever and he would be like, I didn't do that, that didn't happen. He would make you doubt what you experienced and you believe it. And there were so many times my mom would be like, he pushed me, he hit me, he did this, call the police. And the next day she'd be like, he never did that, it was my fault, I was overreacting. It took this, and it took them writing down what happened after my mom was strangled. It took them writing it down, the events that occurred, for them to be like, later, like this did happen because they started to doubt it too. He's even tried to make amends. He'll go from being really angry and really abusive and insulting towards her, and he'll switch it to be like, I love you, I care for you, I'll just come back to me, I'll treat you better, I'll do this for you, I'll do this for you. He'll flip-flop. Fast forward to a few months from then, from when my mom was strangled, my aunt sends out an email to the rest of her family being like, why did you leave us, Michelle? You hurt us. Did we do anything to make you leave? Conrad never cheated. And so she sent out that email and it was gaslighting my mom, and it gaslit us too in our experience. And it was very hurtful. And I reached out to her via text. She claimed in her email that she reached out to us. I never got a call. My brother never got a call, neither did my mom. But I reached out to her after receiving that email from someone, and I was like, look, what you did, it was hurtful and it wasn't true. We've been abused for this, that, and the third. And she would flip it to be about her, right? And she'd be like, oh, I must be such a horrible person. I never noticed. I can't believe this was going on. Oh my gosh. And I'd be like, you need to get him help. He needs help. And she would just ignore it. And today, my dad does that all the time, where he'll do horrible things to us and he'll just send us money to kind of please us and try to get back on our good side. While this is happening, the same week, my parents are finally having a conference about the temporary protective order. My mom issued a TPO against my dad. She was granted it. My dad tried to retaliate with some TPO, saying that my mom's trying to blackmail her because she's still saying that there's a possibility they can have a relationship and whatnot. The whole case was thrown out. My dad was pissed. That same night, my car on a little screen had said theft attempted. I had no idea why. I thought it was just a fluke. I was like, whatever. The next day, I parked my car at home at like 12 noon. I go inside my house, I'm working from home, and I come out around like 7:30, the car's gone. No idea. Car was stolen. And so, no idea when that's gonna be fixed. It could be a few months when my parents have the divorce meeting and it's actually written there that the car is stay with me. Who knows? I say all that to say that throughout this whole process that God has been with me. He healed me from depression, made me into a completely different person by healing me from those generational curses that were imposed on me by my father and his father. He's healed me from the feelings of unworthiness and self-hate and from being suicidal. And he's not gonna stop now. If you struggle with depression, if you struggle with being suicidal, please get some help. Please talk to someone. Please pray. I will pray for you. Whatever situation you might be facing right now, there is hope. God is real. He loves you, he cares for you, and he wants to make himself known to you, but he needs you to accept the call. How he talks to people is he'll use people to get his message across. He'll use signs. He'll use circumstances, events. One of the things that I struggle with is I wanted to specifically hear God in this avenue. I wanted to hear him audibly and know for sure, but that's not the way he rolls. You can't put God in a box. He's limitless. He's everywhere, and he'll do anything in order to communicate with you, but you have to be open to receiving it. You have to not shut yourself off and just be like, fine, there is no God. He'll continue to prove himself to you, but it still is going to require you to be open. So I hope that this inspires someone. I hope that someone gains something from this. I hope that you're able to learn from my experience, or even if you go through these things yourself and you had no idea that you're being abused, I hope this will help illuminate a little about what's going on for you and for your own home. You don't deserve what you've been through. You are worthy, you are enough, but please find Jesus. It was a relationship I never knew that I needed. He's the father I never knew I needed,